asking to your sort of clinical experience, you know, people want to leave. Not everybody is happy when they're withdrawing from drugs, but you know, there was concerns about sort of altercations and things like that. How often does that kind of thing happen that somebody sort of,
Goes crazy.
well, I mean, however you want to describe it, has an altercation,
Sure.
physical or otherwise?
Physical or otherwise. It is not a frequent experience. So that used to happen 20 some years ago before we had buprenorphine. And it mainly was with our heroin, people that were addicted to heroin, because it was really painful and hard to control the pain. But with the advent of buprenorphine, it's really comfortable and a much easier 5 to 7 day withdrawal period. So due to withdrawal management issues, that's not the primary reason someone would want to leave. It's because they're craving the drug is why they want to leave. That's the number. That's it. I mean, they're craving. So, we try to, besides behaviorally, try to deal with that medicinally. What else can we give you to help combat some of that anxiety and discomfort?
Okay. And then, and so you asked a question about people sort of leaving against medical advice. And then could you talk a little, there were some concerns about just people being outside. Can you talk a little bit more? I mean, I know Mr. Hallen sort of talked about that. Talk a little bit more about like what would be the kinds of things that patients would be doing sort of out of doors?
Okay. So a certain percentage, unfortunately, a larger percent of patients are smokers. So we would have a smoking gazebo that they would be able to smoke at a designated time. So it's like, okay, here's our 10-minute break. We have our recovery support staff. They say, okay, we're going to go out. We're going to do our smoke break. Everybody's done. Okay, we come back in. The recovery support staff stay with them while they're out in the smoking gazebo. We have to have some outdoor activities. It's inhumane to keep people inside. So we would set up a basketball court, and every place, everybody loves cornhole, so we'll have cornhole competitions, and there's a grassy plot over to one side of the building, all supervised. No, the only time there would be like off property would be if someone has to go to a dental or, physical therapy or other medical appointment that we wouldn't handle.
Okay.
So just outdoor activities. I mean, sometimes we'll have like just fun competitions and, wiffle ball and stupid, gamey things like that. Just get outside.
And then there was also a question about sort of the concern about sort of drug seeking behavior. And so just curious, obviously when people want to leave who are addicted to drugs, they're looking for drugs. What's the sort of typical kind of situation?
Get out of town.
Go back to where they can find drugs?
Back. They have their sources. They don't want. Never have I had someone break into someone's home, and this is 1994. Never have had someone break into someone's home. Never break into a local. And these have been in residential kind of communities. Breaking into wall. None of that has happened because the MO is I got to get back to my source. We'll provide them that transportation because we know that the alternative is worse than if we don't. So.
Thank you.
Miss Glenn, you had a question.
I've lived in Roanoke almost 30 years, on Richelieu Avenue, 2.5 blocks from where I worked at Carillion, but also downtown Roanoke. And there were 8 shelters, the Rescue Mission, Ram House, and other shelters in all. And even when I worked at Roanoke, they were not always had a preference. There were shelters and people coming in with substance abuse issues. So I'm not immune to that. I did have a recent article in the Roanoke Times related to on Peters Creek Road in Roanoke, a facility that was in a residential area that was outpatient, but they filed civil claims for false billing for Medicare reimbursements, and they won that claim. They had not all of the people who were supposedly licensed professional counselors were certified from
Right, thank you. Mr. Wallace, did you have a question?
Two short things. One, I find that if they're gonna allow them to smoke, and that's also a substance abuse or substance, so they're gonna allow that substance in there. But the second is, if tonight or whenever the decision's gonna be made, if they can't locate out there near the hospital, if they truly want to be in our area, where is their follow-up? Where is the next building that they're gonna look into, or have they done that? Or are they gonna pack up and leave because they didn't get the building or the space that they want? If they truly want to be here, they should have, I would think, a follow-up place that they could look into to see about doing it.
Thank you. Would you like, one of you like to?
First of all, I don't know where the assumption that we won't have an HR department came from. We most definitely will have HR conduct background checks, and everyone that needs to be licensed, any clinical staff will be licensed appropriately. That's the fastest way to get into trouble. We do not intend to get into trouble. As far as, alternate locations, there's a few. I'm not going to tell you that they're in Pulaski, but they're in Southwest Virginia. They're in neighboring counties. We believe that this is where we should be. We believe that this is where we could help the most people. I would say that considering the job creation, one thing that I highlighted last time was just, this is one small point. We're going to serve on a slow day over 100 meals a day, right? Say we have a census of 30 on a day, that's a slow day, including staff, that's over 100 meals a day. We typically don't build kitchens into our facilities. We feel like it's a whole nother layer of headache. And what we do is we contract out with food service providers. That's a serious contract for somebody. For a restaurant, for a caterer, sometimes we split it up amongst other, a few different food service providers, but that's just one small way that, from an economic level, we'd be contributing. We could find other locations. We'd rather not. We've spent time and effort here. But to that end, no, we're not going to pack our things up and just go home. We will find somewhere that makes sense in this part of the state because we feel like this is where we could do the most good.
Thank you. Would you like, is anyone else have questions before? Okay. Would you like to say one more?
Thank you. Well, I think that your very engaged citizenry has somewhat helped to demonstrate the point that I was making earlier as to what this process really is supposed to be about. It's interesting, everybody, kind of the theme, I think, was it's needed, but there's concern about the location, primarily because of safety and security reasons, if I had to sum it up in a nutshell. I think a couple of folks talked about how at the last meeting there were discussions about the security, and since that time, again, we proposed some suggested conditions that perhaps you all could impose on the applicant, and one of those addressed security, having the security guard at night, and there's a suggestion perhaps to extend those hours. Those conditions addressed staffing and compliance with the Virginia Department of Behavior and Health Developmental Services regulations regarding patient-to-staff ratios. As Mr. Howland said, it could certainly be made a condition of approval that once approved that they need to submit proof of their CARF accreditation. So I think what happened here tonight shows that meaningful input from the citizens can lead to creating these conditions that will make it safe and secure, or that will improve the location. For example, the suggestion for a fence, I have seen that in a recent approval of a facility in Halifax, and that was a condition to have a fence. So perhaps that is an appropriate condition to have. So, to that end, I think, and Mr. Regas and I talked about this before, and I just want to reiterate, the options before Town Council this evening are, obviously, you could vote, or you could table this to another meeting where we could continue to work on the conditions and talk with you. And then a third option, and what I think we feel is really the most prudent in these circumstances, is to refer the case back to the Planning Commission so that we can discuss these conditions, so that Planning Commission can fully vet and craft conditions to be imposed and to properly recommend those to the town council. Because your zoning ordinance requires that the Planning Commission submit a report and recommendation, and your staff report on the disclosures page from your Director of Planning says that the Planning Commission may recommend any conditions necessary to ensure that the proposal meets the criteria established by the zoning ordinance. And again, it was nobody's fault that the Planning Commission didn't really go very smoothly because of the audio malfunction. But just, as a legal matter, the key really to having an appropriate meeting is that all participants can hear and be heard. And that's really what the law is in Virginia. If all participants cannot hear and be heard, then you really haven't had an appropriate meeting. And I agree with the comment that Mr. Hagan made too. It wasn't really, and in fact, in speaking with your Director of Planning, I said, well, what's the recommendation of the Planning Commission? In fact, it was interesting, the local paper reported the decision, as Mr. Hagan said, he got a call that we want a recommendation for approval. The local paper reported a 3-3, and we got a staff report that said the motion failed 3-2. And in speaking with your Director of Planning, when I asked what the recommendation was, and there was a hesitation to have it really be a recommendation because of what occurred. And it was just a statement of, in the end, this was the way the vote had to be calculated. That's not a good recommendation. That's not in accordance with Section 7.2.4 of your zoning ordinance that clearly contemplates that the Planning Commission will do its function and that you, the council, will benefit from that input from the Planning Commission and a real recommendation with suggested conditions. Or, it may be a recommendation of denial, that the conditions are simply, inadequate, or that there was something that couldn't be tackled via a condition. But that process hasn't occurred. So much as it is hard to go through a lot of public hearings, and that is a difficult part of the process for the applicant, I do feel that in fairness to the applicant and to prudently comply with legal process so that any decision that's made is not vulnerable, that the appropriate thing to do is to refer it back to the Planning Commission so that we can have a meeting. Hopefully everybody will be present, or if we have to use technology, we'll have it completely figured out. But I would recommend that, as I said, as the most prudent course of action, the lawful course of action under your ordinance, and one that's really most fair to the applicant. And very much appreciate your consideration, though, and all the input from the citizens that I think can only lead to a better discussion, however it may end up. So, thank you.
Spencer, I just have a quick question for you. Is my understanding the Planning Commission had a full quorum with Ms. Jonas's stated absence?
They did have a quorum with her absence, yes.
So they weren't short any members in order to do business?
They were not short of any members to do business. I think what she's pointing out is the issue about how the vote came about, and the fact that it wasn't clear that night. It took some research. So from that perspective, yes, there was a quorum. Yes, they could move forward. But there was some question about Ms. Jonas's participation, which she said she asked to be declared absent because she couldn't participate. The question, I guess, then would be is how much did she participate, and did that affect the rest of the meeting? And I don't think it did, but I do think that as far as is concerned with the decision on this, it was very confusing, and that did not leave the public or the commission or anybody at that moment in time that night with an answer as to what happened, which led to, multiple different people hearing different things. So that answers that specifically. If you want me to go on
I
about,
got you. One other question, just to make sure I understand it correctly. It's not a requirement for the planning commission to suggest conditions.
it's not a requirement, no.
Is it a requirement to even send it to the planning commission? Because I don't believe it is it?
By tonight here,
Yeah.
is that what you're asking?
Yeah, well, no.
I think initial applications
Initial
require the
application,
planning commission
they do
to
require-
review and
Yeah, the
Okay.
initial
approve, I
application
mean,
would be whether
recommend.
You needed to refer it back, that's an option, not a.
Okay. Maybe that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it has to go through that step. I think that's the zoning ordinance says, but no, we don't have to send it back. It's my read on the statute, ordinance, whatever you want to call it.
What we have seen from the public and pointed out is, they have pointed out that they've made suggestions and changed things over time. Well, they've changed things over time because of listening to people in the planning commission. So I don't believe just as a practical and educational matter that any of that is disingenuous. Where they have actually offered conditions probably comes from the fact in the planning commission, they don't hear a lot of cases like that. Their familiarity perhaps with whether they themselves suggest conditions may not have been a point of awareness at the time. It may have been a point of awareness. I'd have to talk more with Chairman Meyer about that. But I think what came of that is kind of an understanding. It was a long meeting. I don't know that anybody at that point was even considering much else. But what you have seen is from their presentation that ended up on your dais, not in the packet as a staff report, but as something that was supplemented later on, they have addressed some concerns with conditions to you all. And what I think what she was clearly asking today, she laid out the three options. You could move forward and vote, you could table it and talk about it later, or you could refer it back to the planning commission to have them more fully vet the conditions themselves. That would then come to you where you could be vetting the conditions rather than doing it tonight, sort of on the fly and without having those conditions voted on by the commission. And with the lack of cleanliness of how that vote occurred at the commission, that's not an unreasonable request by the applicant to refer it back that way for the commission to address that. But that's not, again, not a mandate, but those are the options and a request that they've made. Does that answer anything?
Yeah.
Yep.
We do believe that would require public hearings again at the planning commission and here, to allow the issues to be fully and appropriately vetted before you make the decision, but just so you understand.
Well, before I move on any further, I'm going to close the public hearing, which I probably should have done, but sorry.
No, that's appropriate.
Now, if one of you'd like to make a motion to do whatever you think, I'm all ears.
I'll make a motion with the questions and concerns of the process at the planning commission, initial hearing, to move that this request be moved back to the planning commission to be vetted a second time.
And if you don't mind me adding to that, specifically ask the planning commission to consider conditions of the if various conditions as proposed by the applicant and the community to address the community concerns.
It's like
I'll make a second.
Do you agree with that,
Who am I
Brooks?
second? Here's the,
I'll go with that.
Okay.
Like a dual motion.
So we have a motion. Was there a second?
There
Second.
was, Mr. Penn.
Just as a matter of clarification, they can also recommend other conditions.
Yes, I just meant that I just specifically wanted to ask that the planning commission consider and recommend any and all,
Okay.
if they so choose to recommend it or not recommend it.
Yes.
All right, may I have a roll call for that, please, ma'am?
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Dawson?
Aye.
Mr. East?
Aye.
Mr. Ratliff?
No.
Mr. Klontz?
Abstain due to possible conflicts of interest.
Mr. Reese?
Aye.
All righty. Well, thank you for that. And now we'll move on to the, well, we've sort of done a public comment, but is there anyone else that, I have no other sheets for anyone with any other public comments. So I will move on to the consent agenda. If you have had time to look at your minutes from the last meeting and someone would make a motion to pass them.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the Tuesday, July 19th, 2020 meeting minutes.
Second.
And may I have a roll call for that, please?
Mr. Penn?
Yes.
Mr. Dawson?
Aye.
Mr. East?
Aye.
Mr. Ratliff?
Aye.
Mr. Klontz?
Aye.
Mr. Reese?
Aye.
We'll move to the council comments. Mr. Penn, do you have any comments tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna wait for the to move out. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What do you want to mention to the council is about 4 or 5 years ago, this council approved a place to give the ACE program $50,000. To this day, that money has never been spent. So we need to know how you feel about it today. It come up again at the 2x2.
Do you mean that we've never given it to them, or they've taken it and just never spent it? We've never given it to them.
Never give it to them.
Oh, okay.
So why is that? Do,
Somebody dropped the ball. Probably Sean. Yeah. There are only 3 of us over here that is you, Jamie, and myself.
so the ACE, just a little history on that. The ACE program is, you know, I don't know if everybody's familiar with
5
it.
years.
Yeah, but the ACE program, it was prior to the county engaging or entering into the ACE program, and they were going through some, you know, some, I don't know, clarification,
Well,
changes, whatever.
at the
whatever
time,
at the time.
at the time we did that, the county was opposed to it.
Oh, okay, well, I was being nicer. But so,
Mr.
but
Dahl, you may have help us out there.
anyways, we committed at that time, what I was gonna say is, we committed at that time, whether it's palatable or not, as a council, to give that money to the ACE program. I'm just surprised that it never made it there.
It evidently never made it, and it was never requested. And what has happened since then, as I understand it, is that the county has been participating at significantly higher levels than that 50,000. And they have now suggested, not that we necessarily give the 50,000, but that we somehow participate on a 50-50 basis for any students that are residents of the town in the program, and have guesstimated, my word, that commitment might be $20,000, $25,000 a year. And they've gotten that based upon having the community college do a little bit of research as to how many students they may have had. And of course, the difficulty with that is that so many people have a Pulaski address and Pulaski zip code, you know, that it's probably not precise, but they're trying to redirect some of their own school funding to a different kind of program. I believe that preschool was suggested. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
I think so, yeah.
So all I know, the original intention was a one-time $50,000 grant, whatever you call it, to the ACE program. It wasn't intended to be an annual thing, so I guess that would be a discussion that we would have to have. But we're all members of the county, citizens of the county. So I think that would be unusual, would it not, that a town participate? I don't know.
Do you know how long the county's participated? Because I think that we were on.
What was the question?
How
Was it-
long has the county participated?
How long? I don't know. It's,
Wow.
This was evidently in 2000 and, I think I've got it right, 17, that the commitment was made. And my understanding from talking to the county and from what they said at the 2-on-2 meeting is that they had participated at, I hope I got this right, don't quote me on this newspaper. I think they said they did 100,000 in 2019 and 200,000 in 2021. Does that sound right, Olivia?
Sounds about right.
now, Jonathan asked for 15,000.
Well, he's given us an estimate based upon one cohort and two cohorts, and said he thinks it would be about $15,000 a year, but it would really be based upon how many students who live in the town participate in the New River Community College. So it could be a different amount each year.
He mentioned here that the town could partner with the county on ACE for under 15,000 a year.
Okay, well, my understanding is it might vary, but you're probably very correct, because you're reading from something, yeah.
I hear his saying too, because I have heard it from Jonathan that the county is the town, the town's the county. So going back to his comment of they all live in the county. I don't know.
I'm also not. I don't. It'd be interesting to know whether or not the towns of Christiansburg and Blacksburg are contributing to ACE. I don't know if they may very well be, or Pembroke or Narrows or anything like that.
Can we
so.
put that on to our
Can we
next?
communicate directly with the community college about it instead of the county?
You certainly can.
Or with the ACE people.
That's community college.
Yeah, it's all handled through the community
Is it?
college.
I think
Maybe we can get our information straight from
Be happy.
them.
I know Olivia was
No, it's
trying to get some more information.
Foundation.
That's where we got that $100,000 and
Scholarships.
$200,000 numbers from in those 2 years. But the interesting thing to me was that we evidently made the commitment. It was a public comment decision, and yet it was never asked for. And as I understand it,
I think here's what
being asked for now, not at that level, but in a different way, so that funding can be redirected to something else
here's-
that's educationally oriented.
Right, I think here, if I recall correctly, it's kind of come back to me. Since the county was not participating, our $50,000 was not enough to kick the ACE program off in Pulaski County. And I believe that's probably why it never
It never was asked for.
It was never asked for, because until the funding, and I don't know in the county, it was a year or two, maybe 2 afterwards.
It was 2 years, and
And then the
statement
county.
is that we, in effect, by our action, caused the county to participate. Is that a fair statement, Mr. White? So we were the catalyst to cause them to start participating.
Well, they have a board of supervisors. So, I mean, I love my county counterparts, but I mean, they made the decision to do that. It was a previous board. So I don't know that we made them do it, but
Well, if the council would like some more information, I'm more than happy to contact the community college and see what's involved. The request was not from the community college, it was from
there may be an
county
option.
administrator at that meeting.
Maybe there's an option there to, if it's 15,000, and then you could do that until it's gone, for 3 years or something,
With the 50,000 being the,
with the 50,000 being it.
Jimmy, wasn't some conversation between you and McCready?
I can't even remember what we talked about 20 minutes ago. You asked me. I remember it was a big, it was a long discussion and information, but I don't remember.
But I say that about the 15 until we get to the 50 is just because we committed.
I know we didn't hear any more about it, so.
Yeah,
I mean, if you'd like, if we could check and see if any other towns town and
I'd like
county.
to report back to you
Ne-
before the next meeting.
Yeah, and then we can discuss it at the next. We can put it on the next agenda or something. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Penn? Mr. Penn, anything else?
I'm done, thank you,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're fine. Mr. Dawson?
The only thing I'll say is I think it's unfortunate, for us to, have to move that decision back to the planning commission and go that route. But I think it's important for citizens to know that, there is work being done, and because of this issue that we've found, our understanding is found some ways that we could strengthen our process through the planning commission and improve maybe procedurally how we were handling some things, a few steps that were in, and so I think in moving forward, we can ensure that we can go through these processes a little bit smoother and ensure that action's been able to be made in a timely way. That's all I have.
It just to piggyback on that, it is a shame that happened. So hopefully we'll learn from it
Live and learn.
and it won't happen again.
Mr. East, do you have anything to say?
No, I'm sorry.
No, you're
I don't have anything to say.
Mr. Ratcliffe, you don't have anything tonight, right?
I'll just relate to the chief of police and everybody that was involved into the night out they had this evening. It looked like it was a very, very big success. I did get to go over and mingle around a little bit, and appreciate everybody that had anything to do with that. It was really nice.
I got a great picture looking back from fall stamping,
Yeah.
big flag, and I did. Yeah, I mean, it looked really cool.
It was nice, yeah.
It was
Done a good job.
picturesque.
Mr. Klontz, do you have anything?
Nothing this evening.
Mr. Reese?
I also wanted to say it was a great event. I actually did get a chance to go out there, and I know my kids had a blast. So thank to all the organizations that came out, all the various civic and our. I also got a chance to dance a little bit do a little line dancing with our chief of police and chief of fire, and I think have to report that the police definitely did a little bit more dancing than the fire department did. So that's just facts. I hope I don't get in trouble for that, but it was a lot of fun, and it's always great to see the community out and enjoying ourselves. I do want to say about the planning commission thing. I mean, it is unfortunate that it's taken longer, but there's no reason to rush a decision that you can if something and this is one of those things that clearly has struck a nerve with our community, and I think it's important that we give both the community a chance to speak their piece and also give businesses a chance to sort of address those concerns. And I hope that we can come to a good arrangement, and maybe this will help people understand the zoning process a little better. Maybe we can make some improvements.
Vote count, right.
Well, but not even just that, but just that the process can be it's messy, but it's necessary, and that sometimes messy isn't bad. It's just you get people's sometimes processes are messy because you got a lot of people in the room, and that's good, and that's not a bad thing. And I did have some questions from community members about water lines. I'm sure this is the last thing you want to talk about, but there was a question about that I've gotten more than once about, do we have a plan to replace water lines? Since we have, had a few of these big issues, do we have something? And that doesn't have to be answered tonight, and it may be a future conversation that we have, but I think our community members would appreciate knowing if there's those kinds of things in the works. That's it. Thank you.
My mind is kind of fried tonight, but I really want to thank the public for coming out. It was nice to see people at a meeting. I wish they did it more often just to come and know what's going on. I know that they can watch it online, but it's nice to see that they're wanting to be involved. And I think our town wants to be involved, but they just don't sometimes know how to be involved, and that we've got a lot going on. Thank you for one thing, but but we've got a lot going on in our town and good stuff happening. So I don't know. There may have been something else, but anyway, that's all. So with that, the manager's report.
Well, two or several of you have already mentioned very successful National Night Out. And really, Sonia Ramsey in the police department is responsible for pulling all that together. She did a terrific job, and we had a number of civic organizations that participated as well. So it was an opportunity for our citizens to learn about resources in the community, kind of to get to the mayor's point about people not always knowing. Secondly, I want to mention that we have scheduled for this Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning the dedication of the naming of the portion of Lafayette Street that goes beside the sheriff's office to Sheriff F.D. Connor Drive, and we expect his family members to be present, and would be great if the council members could be there. We expect, excuse me, the activity to be very short, that we won't be out there long, but we would like to have some presence, and I certainly have some staff members and myself who will be there as well. And I had several people tell me while I was at the National Night Out event how it would be great to have more events like this for people to come in. We actually had young people there as early as 2:30 in the afternoon, and the event wasn't supposed to start till 4. But I do want to remind people, because it will occur before your next council meeting, that on August the 13th, they will have the Rhythm and Ribs event at Jackson Park that I've heard any number of people tell me was a great event in the past, particularly the ribs. But I'm sure the rhythm was good as well. And I think they have an art portion of that activity this year. I would just tell you officially, we closed on the loan with VRA that was given to us by the Virginia Department of Health for the Brookmont project. So I did advise the contractor of a notice to proceed on that particular project. We have gotten unofficial word that the county wants to participate by increasing the height of the tank, and they will bear the expense for that addition. That's roughly $225,000. We will have to appropriate that money in order for us to actually add that to the contract, but that should not delay the project at all. But you will see maybe as early as your 16th meeting, the public hearing to appropriate those additional funds, but those funds would be coming from the PSA in order to add that additional height, which would improve water service to the county in the future. So that'll be coming, and we continue to have conversations with representatives of James Hardy and the low bidder on trying to consummate a contract on the James Hardy project, and hopefully we'll have some word on that by, again, your next meeting. We will be sending out to you in advance of the 16th meeting a copy of the traffic study, as well as the evaluation of two-way streets. And I would ask you all, when you get that, to take some time studying that, because we will very quickly be having the water line project go out for bid, and we're going to be fast-paced in getting a lot of things decided as we move that activity forward. We were going to have a presentation this evening, but because of the 3 public hearings, we thought the evening might go on a little bit longer than normal, and I think I guessed right on that. So be prepared to maybe have an equally long meeting on the 16th, but hopefully on some subjects that I know the council has been eager to hear the results of those studies on. So,
If I may, Mr. Mayor, one more comment. Make it quick. There is one thing I noticed I wanted to bring up, and you don't have to answer me tonight, but the trash situation on Main Street and on streets surrounding Main Street, it's just, it seems like a lot of it in the alleys.
Oh, really?
And I'm not sure what our options are there. I understand there's manpower involved, but it looks pretty bad. So I've noticed that recently. So if there's anything we can do there. And then I did have a comment from someone, and they asked when we could get rid of the McDonald's trash cans on Main Street. So if you look at our trash cans, they're kind of dated and old. And so
Part of what,
they said it in jest, but I get the point.
part of what you all will be engaged in helping to decide when we get to some very critical decisions. The first one really being whether or not you want a two-way or one-way street on a permanent basis. We obviously are going to have two-way on Third Street during the water line replacement on West Main. But once we make the decision, I shouldn't say we, it's the council's decision, on that matter, that will then trigger the need for design of the rest of the spaces. And clearly, and I think we have even had this mentioned before, we'll be looking at the lighting as well as the sidewalks and what parking arrangements we will be making. And we may want to change trash cans as well in that process.
Seems pretty minor now that you've gone through that whole laundry list. Thank you for diminishing my trash.
And I will tell you that Pulaski on Main approached me about the removal of trash in the containers at what we call the Pocket Park, because that park is getting a lot of use. A lot of people, even in this heat, are going out and sitting there and having meals and then moving the tables around so they can get access to the charger for their cell phones and that kind of stuff. So they have volunteered, and we have provided them with the trash bags, and they're now going to be responsible, Pulaski on Main, for actually emptying those cans. Because our schedule, was kind of like once a week, and it really needs to be done 2 or 3 times a week, and they've taken responsibility for that. I don't know if that'll help the trash issue, but I will certainly have that monitored.
Yeah, it would certainly help. But if you just take a walk down Main Street tomorrow, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's pretty prevalent. It's probably the worst I've seen.
Oh.
Yeah.
Be happy to look at that.
So I think we can at least say that means that people are on Main Street. If they're throwing trash out, I mean, it's like not having enough parking. It's kind of a good problem to have.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And since I started to answer that one, even though you told me I didn't have to tonight, I would just mention in response to Mr. Reese's question, we don't have really what I call a master plan for the total replacement. The number would be humongous. And
Oh no, I know. I'm well aware of that, but I think that there are probably places that would
we are
benefit.
identifying sections of lines that need to be replaced, if not the total line.
Great.
And in fact, the most recent break that we had on Commerce
Mm-hmm.
Street has prompted us to put in an order for 2 valves that will segregate a very large portion of the line to be replaced, but still allow us to have water service
Great.
while that's happening. And just yesterday, the town engineer identified another stretch where we have done 2 repairs in the last year, and I've said, replace it.
Great.
And that's been kind of the approach that I've taken in other communities, that after the second repair in the same place, it's time to just go ahead and replace the section. So we are replacing as we identify that way, but as far as a master plan, that has not been done, and it is a big number, that's for sure.
Oh, I'm sure.
The mountain bike park is looking even cooler. That thing is going to be awesome. Excited about
Done
that.
By the end of August.
Will the parking be ready then too?
Yes. In fact,
That thing's going to be awesome.
what has happened with that, the contractor was bringing in a lot of dirt. It was getting very expensive, and so they decided to move some dirt on the site. So they've essentially created the parking lot that we thought we were going to have to come back in and do. We will have to put some stone and gravel on it, but it should be ready at about the same time as the park. We also will be doing some, what I call culling of some of the shrubbery and trees that at the present time kind of keep you from seeing the park in its total. You see it from either direction as you're traveling on the road, but don't really see the main part of it. So we'll be doing that over the next several weeks as well.
It's a Town of Pulaski outdoor theme park. It's going to happen.
Outdoor.
Those 3 days off a week, I'm telling you, really good.
So I think,
We have a lot of people who are very, very anxious about that park.
It is neat.
A lot of excitement in the community about it.
I think what we've got out of this is that we need to get some trash bags and give to Mr. East. And then can we put in honor of on one of the trash cans when we replace them? You know, our trashy, our council.
Well, we could have adopt a trash can. Many communities have adopt a spot.
Name them after who you want. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just- All right. Well, with that, just like a reminder of the future council meetings, next council meeting will be August 16th, 2022, closed session at 5:30. Public session will start at 7. And as I have nothing else on this here agenda, I call this meeting adjourned.
Good job, Mayor.
Sorry?
Friday.
Friday morning.